Our next group for Module 5 is going to be factoring trinomials, and we're going to start off with ones with a leading coefficient of a 1. But I want you to realize it doesn't matter what the leading coefficient is. Again, still GCF first, check your order, and then we're going to look at it and determine our signs. It doesn't matter which format you're using, you should always determine your signs. So this first box tells you, again, what we're talking about with a trinomial, remember, is ax squared plus bx plus c. So we're going to look at the last term, which is the plus c, and determine what we're going to do based on the sign. If that sign is positive, stop and think about it. Two numbers multiply to give me a positive. They either both have to be negative or they both have to be positive. And we determine that by looking at the sign of the middle term. So they will match the middle term, which is the bx piece. If the last term is negative, then the signs will always be opposite. One will be negative, one will be positive, but it will matter which one you do. So please double check that. So we're going to start off right now. We're going to look at if the leading coefficient is 1. I want you to use trial and error because these are problems we can actually do in our head. So now we're going to look at number 3 through 6 on our module handout. Starting with number 3. First, again, always look, is there a GCF? There is no GCF. It is in descending order. The leading coefficient of this trinomial is a 1. And what I mean by that is there's a 1 there. So we're going to start with trial and error, but please remember what I suggested. We always start and decide what our signs are going to be. So because this is a minus 18, we know our signs will be opposite signs. So I have one positive and one negative. Right now, I don't know which one goes with what number. I also know, because trial and error says we have to design it to work for the first term. So the only way we get x squared is an x times x. We've designed it to work for that. We now want to design it to work for that minus 18. We can do this one in our head, and I'm going to write it on the side. I'm going to put it in a box so you can see what I'm talking about. If the leading coefficient is a 1, we are asking ourselves, what two numbers multiply to give me a negative 18 and add up to give me a negative 3? What two numbers multiply together to give me negative 18 and add up to get a negative 3? Pause this, try it, try to figure out that combination. When you're talking about 18, the numbers 1 times 18 works, the number 2 times 9 works, the number 3 times 6 works. And the only two that are going to work where I add them together and I get a negative 3, and remember, they're opposite signs, are going to be, I'm going to write it down here just so you can see it, it would be a negative 6 times a positive 3. That gives me the negative 18, and when I add them together, I get a negative 3. So it does matter which one you put with the negative and which one you put with the positive. This is my answer. I can easily check it by foiling. So that would give me x squared minus 6x plus 3x minus 18. Add the two middle terms together that are like terms. I get x squared minus 3x minus 18. That works. Signs are so important. Okay. When the leading coefficient is a 1, we can do this idea in our head. So I'm going to go to number 4 now. First question, is there a GCF? No. Next idea is I have two different variables, x squared and y squared, so we want those on the outside so the order is correct. Since there's a leading coefficient of a 1, we're going to use trial and error. And remember again, we look at this last sign to determine my signs. This sign is a positive, which means I will have to have two signs that match, because that's the only way I'll get a positive. And we always match the middle sign. So I will have two positives, guaranteed. Doesn't matter what technique I use, that has to happen. The only way we get x squared is an x times x. That's why we're going to do these in our trial and error format. Again, I'm going to write down over here on the side what two numbers multiply to give me 8, that when I add them, I get a positive 6. Because remember, we're multiplying them to get the outside term, but when we add them, when we FOIL, we get the inside term. So again, numbers for 8 is 1 times 8. That's not going to give me 6. The next one is going to be 2 times 4. That one works. This is my answer. And actually, it's not my answer. I would have caught that if I would have FOILed it out. Stop and ask yourself, what did I just miss when I did that problem? There should be a y there. And I caught it before I was going to multiply it out, but that's super easy to do, and that's why I say on a quiz and a test, please check it. So my check here would have been FOIL it, which is x squared, plus 4xy. When we have multiple variables, remember we put them in alphabetical order. Multiply my inner, which is 2xy. Multiply my last, which is 8y squared. Add my like terms together. I get the 6xy. So it works. Please be careful. Variables and signs. Pause this at any time you need to. Rewind it. Listen to it again. So looking at number 5. Number 5, no GCF for this problem. But the order is incorrect. We want it in descending order. So please get in the habit of doing that again first. So then we look at our sign. Positive means it matches the middle. So I have an x and an x, and it has to be a plus and a plus. The only two numbers that multiply to give me 17, since it's prime, is 1 times 17. And when we add those two together, it does work. I'm going to check it here underneath. X squared plus, multiply my outer, 17x, plus, multiply my inner, which is 1x, plus my last. That gives me the 18x. That works. Going to my last one from this group, number 6. Again, pause it, rewind it if you need to. Remember, your first step should be GCF. And if I look across this, I can pull out a 3 and an x. And I'm going to circle that because that's really important and that's part of my answer. But once I pull it out, I'm going to be looking at a different trinomial to continue to factor. So when I pull that out, I have an x squared plus x. Divide 126 by 3 in your calculator. If you divide, again, I'm going to do it over here on the side just because I don't have my calculator here at this point. So this is going to give me 12. And then that 6 is going to give me a 2. So it should be 42. This here needs to be on your answer blank. If it's not, it's incorrect. But you need to not look at that to continue with the problem. Leading coefficient to 1, so it has to be an x and an x. We look at that last term to decide my signs. It's a minus 42, which means I should have a positive and a negative. When I factor this out, I'm going to say it slowly. We want two numbers that multiply to give me 42. And when I add them together, I'm going to get a positive 1x. The signs have to be opposite. So what two numbers multiply together to give me negative 42, that when I add them together, I get a positive 1. So multiply to give me a negative 42, add to give me a positive 1. So that should be, first two numbers most of y'all will pop up with 42. It should be 7 and 6. But now we got to be careful on my signs. I want it to add together to give me a positive 1. So the smaller number is going to be the negative. So 7 minus the 6. If I want to check this, you always FOIL first. So x squared minus 6x plus 7x minus 42. Add my like terms, which gives me a positive 1x. So that's the part of the FOILing portion. Then we would need to multiply that by 3x. That gives me 3x cubed plus 3x squared minus 126x, which is correct. Always, always be careful of your signs and be careful of your variables and your GCFs.